All right, I think we are live. And I already see that we have attendees. Folks, if you can hear me, would be great if someone of you could just put that into the chat that you can hear me okay.
Oops.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, Andrew says good. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. All right.
Oh, I don't see anything on my chat. Does that matter?
No, you should, but it doesn't matter. I'll have the chat here, so I can see what people are typing.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Chat. Oh, there it is. I see it.
Okay.
Oh,
good.
Great. Okay, Sven. How wonderful.
Oh, right. Okay. So, hi. I'm Kolja. I'm the technical director of the Hollywood Music Workshop, and I will be hosting today's session. And it will be a very interesting discussion / interview with Miriam Cutler. And I might be able to pick up some of your questions. I can't really promise I will be able to pick up all of your questions, but I will try to address some of your questions towards the end of this. And this will run about an hour. And we will talk about a lot of interesting topics, such as how did Miriam get into music? How did she get into film music? What does it mean? What's her advice for composers starting out? And then very interesting, very important, what does it mean to be a woman in this business? What does that entail to be as successful as Miriam is? And then we'll also talk about, because Miriam has a passion for teaching and she will bring that passion to the Hollywood Music Workshop. So we'll also talk about what she will be doing at her class. So then it would be great, folks, if you could just introduce yourself really briefly on the chat, basically just, your name, where are you calling in from? So where do you live in the world? And maybe just with one sentence, a little bit about background, like you're already a working film or TV composer, or you're an aspiring composer, or, you're just interested in the topic on the fence line right now, but whatever it is. That will be very great because Miriam actually will use that information to address then some of her advice specifically towards your background. And so with that, then let me introduce our guest today, Miriam Cutler. She's an Emmy-nominated film composer, and her specialty documentaries and indie films. She is definitely a very versatile film composer. And some exciting facts about herself. If you heard about the Sundance Institute and its Sundance Film Festival, Sundance runs a very prestigious lab every year, and she has been a couple of times a lab advisor there for this lab, and she will be talking about this later on. So in case you haven't heard what that is, the Sundance Lab, you will definitely hear about it. And she also has been on the panel as a juror, no, not really panel, as a juror, really. And then she also is a member of the Academy of Motion Pictures, and also very interesting, and again, this will be on our topics, she is one of the founding members and board members of the Alliance for Women Film Composers. And she is also one of our instructors, so she will be at our Hollywood Music Workshop this summer, and we're very excited to have her. And you see really only some of her work. I mean, she scored more than 100 films. Some of them got rewarded, Oscar nominated, and so on. And Hunting Ground got a big award, and also A Plastic Ocean is her most recent project, which is a documentary, what we can do about the plastic pollution of our oceans. All right, so then without further ado, I'll basically, welcome you, Miriam. So thank you so much for being here. And how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to meet everybody and find out more about what they're interested in.
Excellent. And
Okay.
so let me make you, so I give you the spotlight. There we go.
Good
So,
morning or good evening to some of you.
exactly. All right. So, tell us a little bit of about yourself, kind of, your background, how you got into music. I think you had some family influence. So how, did you grow up with music, and how did you get into the overall music industry, and were you always starting out as a film composer, or did you do something else before that?
Well, basically, of course, like a lot of kids, I grew up in a family that played music, but nobody was professional. And there was certainly no desire from my parents that we become professional musicians. But my interest in music took me a long way. I played, and mostly I did music just for myself. Like a lot of people start off, I wrote songs and, just try to make myself feel better, or learn songs by artists I really loved. And when I was in high school, actually, I got into folk dancing, and that's what it piqued my interest in world music. I became exposed to music from all over the world through my, love of folk dancing, and I carried that into college, where I started playing in ethnic bands, like from the Balkans or Greece or Israel, Yugoslavia. So during college, actually, I became much more interested in social justice and activism. And when I was in college, we were going against the Vietnam War and feminism, women's rights, and things like that. So I became very interested in that, and ended up majoring in anthropology and going to graduate school in anthropology, always playing music. I left school to actually become an activist, and I worked as a researcher for public interest lawyers. So this all speaks to my interest in documentaries. I still was playing music all the time in bands, performing in clubs, doing all that stuff, being a songwriter. That's how I ended up building a little studio. And so eventually what I realized, I did pursue a career in music. I was a performer for many, many years in various bands, and a songwriter. I had songs in movies, but it wasn't very satisfying for me until I discovered documentary film. And it all happened when I worked on a particular film with a very well-known documentary filmmaker, went to Sundance with it. And when I got to Sundance and I was introduced to the documentary world there, I realized I had found what I was looking for my whole life, which was to do music and contribute to something larger than myself that had great meaning for me. And that's one of the things I always like to encourage people, to discover what it is that is your passion and find a way to apply your music in that way. And I can tell you that for me, it's created a long and very satisfying career, where now I'm very far into it. I'm a lot older, and I can look back and say, boy, I'm glad I know what I did with my life. I'm very satisfied with where I am. And I found something that was very meaningful for me.
Will you describe your path into this as straightforward, or had there been some kind of turning points in your life where you didn't really know how it all would evolve?
To me, it's all been just a discovery. I always was moving myself forward, but I like to really make it clear to people that are starting out. You don't always know where you're trying to go, but I trusted my instincts. And when something didn't feel right, then I said, wait, no, this isn't what I want. For instance, I got to a point about 5 years into my career as a composer where I was working very consistently. I was making a living, but I wasn't happy. I was doing work that wasn't really meaningful for me. And so I was ready to give up. And that's at the point where I discovered documentary filmmaking and realized that that was where I belonged. It was a community that I wanted to be part of. So I think it's really important, to apply your energy and move forward consistently. And you don't give up. What you do is you change direction. When you figure out something isn't working for you, it's really good to acknowledge that and go, okay, what else is out there? And that's what I continued to do. And I'm still doing that now, which is kind of how I've fallen into this teaching stuff. I was starting to get asked more and more to do workshops and master classes and advising. And I realize I really like it. So I'm adding it to my activities of what I am pursuing. I realize that it's satisfying for me. So I'm happy to, I look for other areas to be able to do this kind of work. So what I say to people starting out, just pay attention and follow your instincts. Something doesn't feel good, try to understand why that is. And even if you don't, keep your eyes open, scan out there, what else is out there, and keep pursuing it with energy and passion.
And you're really finding your home in documentary scoring. To me,
Yeah.
it seems like the two passions of you, being an activist and really want to bring messages to the world, but on the other hand also being really a full advanced musician. It seems that those two passions there kind of came together. Would you see it that way?
Oh, absolutely. Because one without the other wasn't enough for me. I've done it both ways. I didn't have music and I did my passion for activism, and it was really exciting and fulfilling, but it wasn't enough. And then I did music without activism, and that wasn't enough for me. But when I put it together, that's who I am. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about today. And also whenever I teach, and certainly in our workshop in Vienna, we'll be talking about how do you find these things and bring them into your career path. Because one of the most important things I've learned is that being creative is not just limited to the work you do. Being artistic and creative is about your life. And I realized early on, gee, I'm smart, I'm creative. Why am I so miserable? And I decided to apply my creativity to creating a life that I wanted to be part of. And that's a big part of, I think, being able to create a career path for yourself where you will find satisfaction and the kinds of musical challenges that you may be looking for. And also, of course, a sustainable economic model, a business model. So all these things are very important, and we must use our creativity. We can't just limit it to the studio or to music. It has to be part of our approach to life, I think, which, makes, it took me a long time to realize, oh, I guess I'm an artist and these things really matter to me. And I think that most people who are interested in music, and certainly as a career, most of us start out being drawn to it as artists, and it's satisfying. And so how do you use that creativity to then create a career for yourself that will be equally satisfying?
When you found out that you really are an artist, when people who are not as working as professional artists, in a way, professional in the sense that I make a living of it. That's basically the true definition of being a professional. Many people think of, being a professional related to the skill level, but the skill level is a given. You need to have that.
Yeah.
But really what means to be professional is that's what you do for a living. And so when people who are not working as an artist yet, as in that sense, then there are some kind of scary aspects to it, which might be like, will I always have a steady income? Will I get into difficult situations? So when you discover, wow, I'm really an artist, did that also scare you in a way, or you just embraced it?
No, for me, it was kind of a solution to a problem I was having, which was that I was becoming successful at something that wasn't making me happy. And so you have to look at that, you have to soul search, and you have to figure out what will make me happy, and it turns out doing work that I believe in, being part of a community that I share values with, those are very important to me. And when I have that, then it all comes together in a better way for me. So I guess I've been exposed to people who have been very successful in their careers, not just in music, but just family members and whatever, where I've seen people make a lot of money, but they don't seem happy. And so I figured out pretty early that money was not going to be the answer for me. While we all need to have a sustainable livelihood, there are so many ways to go about doing that. And I think it's important to be in touch and know who you are and what matters to you. A lot of young composers, want to recreate someone else's career that they've observed. That would make me happy. I want to be like John Williams, or I want to be like, Atticus Ross or whatever. But it may not necessarily be what makes you happy. And I think the more you can take responsibility for creating the kind of career that you want to actually have, I think that you have more chance of really finding it sooner and getting on with it. So these are the things that I've learned over the years. I think that a lot of stuff that I'm able to articulate now, I wasn't able to earlier on in my career. I didn't understand what it was that I was actually trying to do. But, you don't want to waste time knocking about, waiting for the phone to ring, trying to follow a certain career path that may or may not even exist anymore. Because our industry is changing very rapidly, and the internet is making a huge change in how we are able to how work is being seen, and also how it's being monetized. So it's very important to understand all these factors. And I figured out pretty early that whatever choices I made were going to be equally difficult. Whether it be working in commercials or in songwriting or in Hollywood or in independent film, whatever you choose is just as difficult to create a career in. So you might as well pick something you actually will want to do when you get there. I hope that's meaningful. It's weird not getting I can't see anybody, so I don't know if this is meaningful for you guys, but let me know, okay?
No, I mean, this is great feedback, and basically it shows how important it is basically that you follow your heart and your passion, that you basically find, you describe it as soul searching. Other people might call it, finding your destiny. And absolutely, it's definitely not about the money. There have been tons of studies done by sociologists and psychologists. There's this famous pyramid, like, if you don't have to fear for your life anymore, and
Right.
you don't have to worry about the food, so kind of the basic needs, so you're in a certain comfort zone. But then whether you're driving that the Volkswagen Golf, or you're driving a Maserati, it's not, it doesn't make a substantial difference. But if you really do what follow your heart, that actually does make a difference. And the other thing which is interesting, and I'm not sure how you see that, but when you do something which you love, you naturally also tend to be much better at it compared to people who do it because they think that's what they should be doing for other reasons.
Well, yes, and I'll tell you something. When you start to, one of the things I want to work on in the workshop, and whenever I do a workshop, it starts with envisioning inside yourself, being as specific as you can about what it is you're actually trying to do. Because when you bounce, you can be just bounced around by other people. And I've seen this, people who have a clear idea and an intention about what they're trying to do are more likely to achieve that. And you can sort of begin to stand out in a large crowd where people are sort of waiting for something to happen or going down a path that doesn't really lead anywhere. But the person who has a strong intention can actually start to stand out. And that's what I experienced in my career. I didn't always know what I was trying to do, but I started by eliminating the things I knew I didn't want to do. And I'll tell you something, when you do that, it's not so confusing anymore. It becomes clearer and clearer as you move forward in that way. Things fall away, and decision-making becomes clearer too. So for instance, I might be offered this opportunity, and this opportunity. And so when I start to develop some clear criteria for what I want to do, it helps me make decisions about what to do much easier. All of a sudden, I'm not tempted. Oh, well, that would be so great because they said it's going to make me famous. Oh, or that would be so great because I'm going to maybe make money in the future. Or that would be so great. It's not a very good movie, but I should do it because I don't have anything else. And when you begin to realize, wait, I don't need to even think about that stuff because here is what I want to do. Let's see what fits with what I want to do. And you begin to be more proactive. And I'll tell you, you begin to feel like you're more in the driver's seat of your own life instead of waiting around for other people to give you a chance. I don't do that. I look for what I'm trying to do. And I also understand what actually will be meaningful for me to do, not necessarily my friend next door who's got another thing that they want to do, you know, but it doesn't mean anything to me. So why would I even want to go there? See what I mean? So, you know, it's really about getting quiet inside yourself and thinking about the thing, you know, sometimes it's as simple as sitting down and making a list. What makes me feel good? You know, I don't know how many people even do that, you know? So as you begin to clarify inside your own mind, it makes everything simpler in your life. It makes choices more obvious. And, you know, like for instance, I realized fairly early that it wouldn't matter how much someone paid me. If I was working on something that I wasn't happy working on, I couldn't stand to do it. And as soon as I realized that, you know, and I thought, oh, I should do this because if they're paying me all this money. But I realized, you know what? It's just in the way now. I'll get more jobs that are like that instead of the ones I really want. So why not just hold out for the ones I really want and figure out a way to make that possible, which means, you know, you do have to figure out your livelihood, but you don't want to get so caught up in your livelihood that you don't leave room for the things that are going to actually move you forward in your goals. So things like that become much clearer. So, you know, like I don't ever sit around and go, oh, I wish I was working on a big Hollywood movie, because I realized a long time ago that that was not, you know, like being successful in that world wouldn't have made me happy. So I had to really, it's hard to accept that sometimes because you look around and your friends are getting all these awards and all this money and all these accolades. But even with all that, I don't think it would have made me happy. So now I can look back and go, okay, I didn't choose to try to be successful at something that I wasn't really going to be happy doing anyway. And yes, there are certain goodies that I don't have, you know. I'm not, you know, I mean, in documentary film, our scores, there's very few places for awards. There's, you know, things like that. Oh, wouldn't I love to have an Emmy? Wouldn't I love to have an Oscar? Those things are not really viable in what I've chosen in independent and documentary film. But I have all these other rewards, and I always have to stay in touch with what matters to me, even though that other stuff sometimes, you know, gee, I wish I, you know, but it's okay because I have a life that I like.
Yes, which is awesome, and you know the way you're saying that, you know, you can feel that is actually the case, which is wonderful. And Miriam, what you just described there is it is absolutely a challenge, and I think it requires constant working on this. You know, a lot of people
Yes.
starting out in this business, I mean, you have to start somewhere, and most people, and you know, even yourself, don't start where they actually end up, where their final path is. And so, and I think especially in the early years, it's very important that while you're doing the stuff, because you need to get started, and also, you know, you need to make a living,
Right.
that you're not getting suddenly put into a certain category where then suddenly it's difficult to get out from. Like, you know, if my passion is to be really a composer, but I also have very good orchestration skills, so I'm doing a few orchestration gigs, you know, just, you know, get some money in, but then, you know, I'm getting more and more labeled as an orchestrator. So, you know, how can I still be a composer, just as an example, right?
Well, that is very, very, very true. I think that's why if you put energy into trying to figure out what your goal is, then you won't find those things as confusing. For instance, when I first started out, I mean, I really kind of literally fell into film scoring. I was always a composer. I mean, I was always a songwriter and a music producer and a performer. But someone asked me to do it, and I put music to picture, and I was just thrilled. I mean, it was like, oh my God, this is it. But then what happened was I started looking for work, and I got a lot of work. I mean, I'm a good, you know, I can, one of the things we'll talk about is how do you generate work and how do you attract filmmakers to you? And those are the kinds of things we'll work on in the seminar. But But what I realized was, okay, I'm generating all this work and I'm getting all these low budget horror movies and things like that. And I'm building my studio and I'm getting known, and I'm getting known for low budget horror movies. I had to start saying no. One day I realized, you know what, this was all great and it's worked, but I need to say no now because nobody else is going to have, I don't have room in my world for anything else, you know? And so I started saying no to that stuff. And, you know, at first it was a little scary, and you have to be prepared financially. You have to know where your income's coming from. But I was able to say no to those things, close those doors, and then I could start to notice other opportunities or how to make other opportunities. I mean, part of building a career as a composer is learning how to create your own opportunities, you know, like from nothing. I feel like when I wake up in the morning, there's nothing, my life is completely unstructured. I have to create every single thing that happens. I have to create the work. I have to create, you know, how I get the work done. I have to create the work, you know. And so I just accept that and embrace it because I've chosen a very independent lifestyle. And there are times it's lonely or scary, but the truth is it's allowed me to create I've created the kind of work that I want to do, and I bring it to me. And I, you know, like I said, we'll talk about some of the practical ways that I've done that and that people can do that for themselves. It's all about taking personal responsibility. I mean, you know, very few people are going to be plucked out and said, you are brilliant. I'm going to drop you over here. Now you have an agent. Now you have a manager. Now you have all these Hollywood offers. That's very rare that happens, if at all, you know. So we have to be people who create our own opportunities, and otherwise you'll just fall into something else that may or may not be what you want. I hope that answered the question.
It absolutely did. And actually, in a little while, we'll talk even a little bit more about it. But right now, I just want to take a step back now. So now that we understand basically your history, you know, coming from a singer-songwriter background and also doing a lot of ethnic music, and now suddenly you are in the world of documentaries. And obviously, you know, having a background with ethnic music is extremely helpful because it enables you to put the local color. Like if you have a documentary playing somewhere in Far East, then you have the ability to put the local color in there. However, you know, composing for film is a huge palette, and you need to be very, very versatile. Yes. So did you have to basically add to your musical toolbox when you got into film scoring?
Well, I'll tell you, it's really interesting. I think this is one of the most interesting aspects of being a film composer. I think the first thing you need to be a good film composer, obviously you need some musical talent, and you need to be able to view music as a storyteller. The next thing is you need to be able to understand the role of music as storytelling tool for a larger purpose. And I also think then that you need to be able to, if you have a grasp of your role as a musical storyteller and you have musical abilities and curiosity and imagination, then whatever the story is that you're telling, you come at it from the foundation of, I am a cinematic composer. I am using music in this way. The rest can be learned. Anything I need to do to expand for a particular project, like every time I do a film, so many times I've been amazed at what I've written. I've never even thought about writing music in that genre or with that instrumentation or, you know, from that place. And it just blows my mind that because I come to it as both a musical storyteller and a student of music, I know how to learn what I need to learn to bring those elements into my musical storytelling. And I have the imagination to go way outside my own box, which is one of the most fun things about being a film composer. And especially in documentaries, I end up all over the place. Like with people with all kinds of different tastes and interests. And so it's a constantly expanding universe for me of musical ideas, because if I just relied on what I started with, it wouldn't be that interesting. But because I constantly have to expand who I am and my worldview and my musical taste, it keeps it very, very interesting. So I think that more than anything else, those are the things you need to be a good film composer. You need to have a real storytelling ability, a real musical talent, and tons of curiosity and creativity.
And, then there is probably also the other aspect. I mean, most film composers basically, they work within their own studio environment. And so there is also a lot of technology to master.
Oh, yes.
And I know you started even in the earlier days of where everything was hardware, where you had the Rex expansion boxes and you had to plug in MIDI cables and all of that.
Oh,
so
God,
how did that go for you? I mean, how did you venture into the world of, being, an artist, an activist, a storyteller, but now you have to deal with all that technology.
Engineer.
How did that work out for you?
Oh, it was really a struggle. I'm not when I first was starting out, I could barely hook up a stereo. I mean, but I'll tell you, I was highly motivated. And one of the really lucky things for me was that when I started, it was all analog and tape machines and barely even had home studios. So I was a very early proponent of home studios. I mean, I started with a 4-track cassette and I did all these elaborate recordings with that. And so I found that the more I did it, the more I was driven to do it more, because being a curious, creative person, the possibilities that became available to me through this technology, it just, I was highly motivated. So even though I'm not a very technical person, it does come a little harder to me. I did have to learn to think like a computer, which is very hard. I'm not a logical person. And so it's been a struggle, but it's been something that I believe is very, very important. And of course, now, like when I first started doing this, my friends thought I was crazy for putting a studio in my own house and for pursuing this. They said, why do you bother? Just go to the studio. But because I was able to get my own studio going, I was able to take lower paying gigs and I could afford to do them because I had my own studio. So that right there, it made all things possible. And as I've kept developing my studio, it's almost like you build it up and you get more and more stuff. And then came digital technology. And now we're down to just, a laptop and an interface and a music mic pre, so you don't need a lot of stuff anymore, but you need to have highly sophisticated ability to work in a computer technology, with software, and it's always changing. And so I think that it's very important to be able to utilize the tools. You just not going to be able to complete the workload without technology anymore. And you're expected to deliver stuff, for lower budgets. You've got to master the technology. So if you wanted a career in this, that comes with it. And, some people come into this career with very strong technical ability and not such developed creative ability. And so it's a kind of a mixed bag, and the other thing that's happened is that when I was young and starting out, I could still make a living as a musician. I could play gigs, I could write songs, I could do all these things and produce things. And now a lot of those kinds of jobs have gone away, especially the playing jobs and even touring and records and recording records and all that. It's all changed. So now people who want to be a working musician feel that they have to be a producer and even a composer in order to just work as a musician. And so that has flooded our industry with a lot of people, and a lot of people who want to be working in music. And not necessarily, like I think when I first started out, there weren't as many people aspiring to be film composers because it was a really kind of an elite profession. You needed to have all these incredible skills as a composer, an orchestrator, and those kinds of things, but it didn't involve all this technology. And now, because music themes have been cut down, like I can produce a full score by myself if I have to, and have many times. I've kind of been going the other direction, bringing back teams, having a team to work with. It makes it more fun and better, I think. But anyway, because I use live musicians. So I think that technology, love it or not, it's here to stay, and you really must master it.
Right, exactly. Let's talk about now another thing. We already, I mean, you cover already in great detail, which is awesome. About some of the challenges, important things you had to do to discover to get where you are. Then, when you look at the whole journey, then how do you look at your career being a woman? I mean, did you find things working differently because you are a woman compared, to the other gender? What are the challenges and what are the advantages of being a female in this business?
Well, it's the kind of thing that most professional people, whether they're men or women do not want to be constantly put in a position to have to discuss their gender, especially in 2017. But unfortunately, it still is a very major issue. And the way I know that is because even though I didn't really think about it that much during my younger years, we've got statistics now that demonstrate how much is against women, in terms of I think it's something like, 2 or 3% of the films released theatrically are scored by women, and it's just as bad. It's not just composers. It's actually across the board in our industry and in many industries, sadly. So that's the proviso. Now that I know those statistics, I realize that this is really a serious issue. When you're in the heat of it, and I've always been one of those women that, there's certain things I knew instinctively. I was a good musician and I was in a band of really good musicians. And I knew that I just had to be, I just instinctively knew that I needed to be, undeniable. That's been my word, undeniable. I have to be undeniably good at whatever I do to get taken seriously. I have to be non-threatening to their girlfriends. I have to be non-threatening to them, but still undeniable. And so those were just behavior modifications that I think a lot of women, especially, I kind of came up in the 70s and so that's just a lot of we did it without even thinking about it. Now that I look back and I see, especially now with the numbers of young women that are coming out of the schools, they're pretty high. There's a huge interest in film composing for young women, but they're not getting past the gatekeepers. And that's one of the things the Alliance for Women Film Composers is working on. We're trying to shine a spotlight on all the talent that's out there and just say, hey, give us a shot, let us stand and fall on our talent and our abilities. And so those are, it is something that is real. It's not in our minds. It's definitely real. We can just look at the statistics and know that. So, I used to hate it when it always came up, every panel, every interview, people always asked it, and I would be mad that they asked it. And I know a lot of my women colleagues have felt the same way. If you had Danny Elfman on here today, would you be asking him what it feels like to be a male composer? Of course not. It's ridiculous.
No.
So,
right.
But the fact is it always comes up. So I made a decision years ago. I'm going to try to have some really interesting answers because it is going to come up and it is an actual issue. And so a few years ago, a couple of my female colleagues, we decided to really start addressing it. We formed the Alliance for Women Film Composers, which I think we'll have the website up on the screen. And so women.
Yeah, I just put the website into the chat so that people have the address there. So yeah,
please
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, check it out because and I just want to say I have been on the board of the Society of Composers and Lyricists for 18 years. I just stepped down this year to give someone else a shot. But so I care very deeply about the state of our profession and where it's going. And there's a lot of important issues out there right now about music rights and monetizing and income streams and the internet and the impact that's had on our ability to earn from our creations. So those are all really important topics, but we felt that we needed something a little more specific for women composers to address these horrible statistics that are out there. So please check out the website. One of the main things we've been doing is just shining a spotlight. We've got an online directory, so people can't say, oh, where do I find a woman composer? Well, we've got a directory, and it's full of really talented people at all, levels, from the most experienced to the just starting out. And we do all kinds of things to help promote and shine a spotlight on the other part of the talent pool that's not necessarily getting through the gatekeepers. And we're doing things behind the scenes with studios and stuff like that, because our industry as a whole, the entertainment industry and the film industry, they've recognized and are being publicly shamed for their lack of diversity. And it's only better for business to have more diversity. So the wind is at our back right now. In some ways, there's at least a discussion happening quite openly. That said, I do think that as a woman, some of what I can bring to being an effective film composer is my love of collaboration, my lack of ego about the work, my willingness to see other people's point of view. And I think those are characteristics that many women have, and men too, but women do have those characteristics. And I think that that's the part of me that's a woman that I've been able to really expand upon in my career. The parts that are annoying are, when I've had things come up in my working relationships where someone's wife was threatened because I was spending a lot of time with her husband, stuff like that, this is a professional situation. So I'm not going to try to steal their husband, but it has come up that way. Or men, I remember early in my career, my filmmaker, who I thought we were having this professional relationship with, started wanting me to go to parties with him and was introducing me as his girlfriend. And I'm like, really? I'm just trying to write music for your movie. So, these are things that I don't think men have to deal with as much. And also, I was a horn player, and I just remember people making innuendos or looking at me with my horn, and then kind of, oh yeah, right, So it's just, I think it's just part. We just accepted that, and I just kind of moved past it and tried to get them out of the way, because I've always been very, very driven by my desire to do well at this profession. And so I just, like many people, and men have their challenges, we all do what we have to do to not let things like that create an obstacle. But it is true. I think women, sadly, in 2017, and maybe even worse now, given the kind of way the world is going, it's something that's a reality that has to be dealt with. I hope that answered your question.
No,
what do people think about that? I mean,
I think right now, just people are just really listening to it. We don't have comments on the chat, but it's just so interesting what you're sharing with us.
I'm being very honest.
No, which is good, and one has to be. You have to be honest about that, because if you're not honest, then you get false hopes, and you need to be very aware of the challenges this entails.
Well, I think we have. I have one of my sayings to myself in life is, if something gets in my way, I just go around. I'm not confrontational. I just go around it.
Yeah, great. That's a great attitude. So, thanks for those insights. What I like to do now is talk a little bit about the Hollywood Music Workshop in general. And then, you will talk about what you basically do there in your specific masterclass. And by the way, Sven just mentioned he tried to open the Alliance website, and I think Sven might be from, he's from Madagascar, so clearly out in U.S. territory. The website sometimes has issues when you try to access it from outside the U.S. the team at the website is trying to fix it. So Sven will let them know that it currently doesn't work for you in Madagascar, and we'll see what we can do. And Lindsay just says it works for her. And she is from London, UK, from Europe, and currently it works from me here in
and maybe try a different browser.
Yeah. They also, what you can do to get around it is just use one of those free so-called VPN services. So you get a temporary US IP address, and then it absolutely will work. If you don't know what that is, just type into Google free VPN servers and you take it from there. All right, so let me then talk a little bit about the workshop, and let me go into screen sharing again, and I will try to make this quick, but I definitely want to share certain aspects about the workshop.
Oh, great.
All right, so there we go. So here again are those websites which are also put into the chat. So the Alliance for Women Film Composers, Miriam is a board member of, and then the other one, Society of Composer Lyricists, she worked on in the past. And then also, of course, definitely check out Miriam's own website, which also has a lot of sound examples of her amazing scores. So you really can listen there to quite a few of her scores. I would highly recommend you do that. So the workshop itself was founded by Dimitri Levitch and Lilo Bellotto. And Dimitri Levitch is one of Hollywood's most sought after session violin players and concert masters. And he basically played in orchestras for more than 1,000 film projects in his long career. And he has this passion about orchestral film music, which requires budget. And so his idea was to bring the idea of orchestral film music to Europe, because in Europe, and we also can talk a little bit about that, because Miriam, you have a lot of experience with working on a smaller budget.
Yes, I do.
But anyway, so one of the ideas about this workshop is bring Dimitri's passion for film music, for Hollywood-style film music, bring it back to Europe. And it started very small in 2009. So this year is our 8th workshop. And it really grew significantly from there. And this year we have Chris Velasco for scoring video games, and then our Miriam Cutler for documentaries, indie films, but also, and you will talk about this right after this, a lot about generic techniques for to be successful in this business as a film composer, which will be very, very interesting. Then we have TJ Lindgren talking about MIDI mockups, and what he's doing is truly mind-blowing. He is he's kind of a secret tip. So if you Google for his name, you don't find a lot, but he's kind of an industry trade secret. This guy is just absolutely amazing. Then we have Johannes Vogel, who is Synchron Stage's a primary conductor. He is teaching conducting. Then we have Joe Kramer, who scored Mission Impossible, Jack Reacher, and others, who talks about composing for the big Hollywood screen. We have Conrad Pope and Nen Schwartz talking about orchestration and arranging, and Conrad and Nen are the top names in film orchestration and jazz arranging. I mean, some of Nen's, she is an Emmy awarded arranger, and her work is truly amazing. And then one of the highlights, and I can't wait to sit in the control room there again, being the assistant recording engineer, is actually recording at the Synchron Stage. And it will be Conrad Pope and Joe Kramer himself guiding you through your orchestral recording project. And the Synchron Stage is just absolutely fantastic, amazing sound. It's one of the best film scoring stages in the world now, that got fully refurbished and renovated by VSL, our partner company, and it's one amazing place. The whole class takes place in Baden, close to Vienna, in a beautiful historic looking conference center. And it's all air conditioned, because summers can get quite hot, not as brutal as in some countries, but it can get hot in close to Vienna there. but you don't have to worry about that. It's fully air conditioned. Then Baden itself is a beautiful spa town. It's just a train ride away from Vienna, and it's has the surrounding landscape with vineyards is just breathtaking. So what I want to talk to you about now, real quick, to round this up is. Before I became the technical director of the workshop, I started as a participant myself, wanting to learn more about film music. So I just want to tell you a little bit from a participant's perspective. And what makes it so special is the face-to-face experience. I mean, there's a lot of stuff online, great stuff, and I myself, as some of you who are in this with us right now know, I'm myself participating in some online learning communities, and in this business you never stop learning. But the face-to-face experience is something else. Being there in the rooms, instructors, and especially also your other classmates, that's something different. And it's all about the networking, building communities, friendships. We do a lot of social activities around the workshop. And my network now I have, composing friends around the world, is truly amazing. We also do public events. So this year, basically, we have something very exciting. Joe Kramer himself, he rewrote the score of a silent movie called Sunrise. And we will have some of the VSL Synchron Stage Orchestra members playing then live while the silent movie is running at the stage you see at the top left there. This is the one of the stages in the conference center. So basically, you will see the movie there with the orchestra playing live to it. That will be very, very special. And our Danube River Cruise is always a blast. One of our most favorite social activities. The other thing also is, I mean, you just heard what Miriam did for amazing things. Is this is not academia, this is a real life experience. All of our teachers are working professionals, they're working in Hollywood, and they're working in this business when they don't teach at our summer academy. And so you basically get firsthand knowledge what it really means to be in this business. And then also what I absolutely love is it's a very international community. I mean, we have students from literally across the world, the South Americas, North America, all across Europe, all the way to AP, to Asia Pacific, people from Korea, from Singapore, from Australia. It's one really, really great international community. And by the way, it feels like a vacation. I mean, Baden is a beautiful spot. I would even go there just for a vacation. So, combining the two is not exactly a terrible thing. And so if you want to find out more, not only what I have to say, just hop onto our website. We have quite a few student testimonials there, which you can watch on video. And then, of course, definitely go into the detailed website of Miriam's class, where she's describing actually what she wants to cover. And that brings me back to you, Miriam. Let's talk about communities. I talked about that this is a great opportunity for networking and communities. So how would you describe
I lost you.
Communities?
Oh, there we go. I think community is super important in this work. I'm a very social person, and this is we work alone a lot, but I don't think I could really have pulled it off without being part of a larger community. And first I'll start with my music community. I was a working musician for many, many years and played with many, many different musicians and developed very strong and lifelong relationships with many of them who still now record for me on my scores. Music is a collaboration, and being a creative person is a collaborative lifestyle. So, it starts with my musicians who come in and one of my favorite parts of doing this is working with real musicians one-on-one and kind of, getting their ideas and collaborating on how to improve the score and things like that. So then I have my musician and composer friends who we supply all kinds of support to each other, whether it be sharing, musicians, sharing information about technology. I've had friends that I could call at midnight when my gear isn't working, and they can say, turn it off, turn it back on. When you're going out of your mind because things aren't working correctly and you're on a deadline and you can't even think straight, and you call up your buddy and they say, have you tried this? Have you tried that? So, I mean, all of these things, I couldn't have existed without my community of music people and supportive, creative people. And then there's my filmmakers, who I bond with every time I work with them, and many of them become lifelong friends, and we share values, and it gives me a sense of belonging into something larger. And when I spend 14 hours a day by myself in the studio, it's nice to know that at the end of it, I'll be going to a screening with my filmmakers and sharing the whole, whatever happens to the film, being part of that, being included. So I think it's super important. And of course, the more relationships you have, I've had other composers call me and say, hey, I can't do this job. I think you'd be perfect. We network with each other. We think of each other. We take care of each other. And same with the filmmakers. Hey, I worked with Miriam. She's great. You should try. So all these things are super important, and you have to have your social skills. Yeah, I mean, there are some composers that are very, very quiet and very, they've managed to have a wonderful career without being very social, without participating in much. But for the most part, it's a very social industry. And the more you can get out and be someone that people want to be around, the better it is for you. So that you'll be exposed to way more opportunities and way more things that you might never even think about, that you didn't know existed. Like when I went to Sundance the first time, I just had no idea there was this whole world of documentary filmmakers. It's international. I can go anywhere in the world. And when I meet documentary filmmakers, we have an immediate bond with each other because it's such a strong community. So all of these things are very important. And that's one of the things also I would like to work on in my workshops is how you present yourself, how you talk about music, how you talk about your music. Are you someone people are drawn to? I have a theory about some of the most successful lead composers. They tend to be kind of like rock stars. They have strong personalities. People are drawn to them. People think they're amazing. They want to hang out with them because they're cool. So there's all these things, and it's definitely worth developing your social skills and your self-image. What do you want to put out in the world? Who do you want to be perceived as? Understanding how to present yourself. I had a thing I wrote about it. It's how to present yourself and your music in meetings, at professional events. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be seen as? And what makes you unique? So those are some of the things that we'll get into. Community is super important.
Excellent. And so how practical do you think a masterclass will be in terms of, that basically you will talk to the individuals and, and look at their specific situation versus just upfront class teaching?
Oh yeah. I'm not an academic teacher at all. I think, what I want to do, and I just came back from doing a 2-month course in Chicago, and it was really, really fun. I had such a great time with the students. They were very, very engaged and into it. So I want to give you practical experience where I'll have you write some cues, and we're going to go in depth about musical storytelling. So some actual experiential assignments where the whole class, I want people to begin to look at the role of the music in the film as storytelling, to really look deeper into it. It's not a matter of putting down some pad and, oh, that sounds great, moving on. No. What is the music actually doing, and what's its purpose in that sequence, and how does it fit into the whole of the score, the whole of the film? What is the role? So we'll do some exercises in practical exercises with that. And through that, we'll get into a lot of the issues around creative collaboration with filmmakers and how do you communicate. I have an approach called Music Story Arc, which I'll share, and it's very practical about creating a language with the director, and how giving you a point of departure together to start from, and help build that relationship as quickly as possible and as successfully as possible. We'll talk a lot about your particular goals, what you're looking for, what your strengths are, help you develop a clear concept of where you want to go with your career. I mean, we'll talk about practical stuff like about business, like how do you create a sustainable business model? How can you, maximize the benefits, the financial benefits of your work? This goes to music rights, royalties, the internet, theatrical, television broadcasts, all these kinds of things. How do you create a sustainable business model, but also have a unique persona that you can present in the world that makes you someone they're drawn to and they want to work with? So those are the kind of things, thinking outside the box, thinking about who you are, and each one of my students will go through those things together, and they'll also have the benefit of feedback from everyone else in the class. We'll do these things as a group. We can also do private if people want to do some private stuff, which is something I did in Chicago. We had our group meetings, and then some people wanted to get into really specific things personally. So I'm totally into that, and happy to share any kind of input I can.
Yeah, and indeed, and as people register for this class, they definitely have the option to book a one-on-one with you.
Yeah, I think those are very effective, and I have a good time with it because we can really get personal and deep with what we're trying to talk about.
Wow, this sounds really exciting, and I think you're even planning to provide some kind of assignments up front, which then people can bring to the class.
Yeah,
right?
I think to give people a chance to I want to give people a chance to write a cue before we get there, so they have time. Like I'm going to probably make the assignment in the next week or so. It's definitely early in June. I want people to have time because we aren't going to have a lot of time to actually compose while we're there. So when I want people to bring something they've had time to think about and get as deep with it as they can with whatever the notes I give them. And then when we get there, we're going to rework it and try to build on and use it as a learning tool to build on how we look at story, how we tell a musical story. What story are we telling? How do we choose which story we're telling? What information do we need to give the director what they want? And stuff like that. So yeah, that's my plan. I'll send, there'll be some footage and some notes. And if people want to talk about it, if they have questions, we can probably do something like on Skype or something.
Excellent. So to round this up, since basically already exceeding our time contract, and I definitely want to honor your time, but time flies when the dialogue is as interesting as this discussion. So how would you characterize what it means to work on a documentary or an indie film compare to traditional Hollywood production? And then also, then what could that mean? How does it relate to working in areas outside the US where budgets for music production might not be always as generous?
Well, I mean, believe me, in the States, a lot of music budgets aren't very generous. That's one of the things I've really focused on in my own work. How can I create the best possible music that would satisfy me with the kind and stay in the kind of, in other words, I like the focus on the artistic, and I like being independent, and I like not working on formulaic films. I like working on unique projects. That puts me into the independent film category. And of course, I like working on issue-oriented and activist films and all kinds of documentaries. So by default, I've placed myself in a lower budget arena. So then the other part of that is, how do I then be able to work with budgets that are lower but still provide the kind of, like I personally only want to do, I work with live musicians, and I use MIDI to mock up the score and present that to the directors. And I use MIDI for electronic sounds for things that I don't need played by a live musician. So I've spent a lot of time figuring that stuff out, and that has to do with how I've monetized my music, and I own my rights so that I can get back end as much as possible, which has supplemented my income so that the film budget can go towards the music itself. So those are, and I think that that's more of a model that you're talking about for outside the US and outside the mainstream entertainment. When you go mainstream Hollywood, you're giving up a lot of freedom in some sense creatively. There's more levels of control over the actual project and more focus on the financial elements of the project and the profitization of the project, as opposed to an independent film. People tend to be more, they have lower expectations of monetary reward and higher expectations of artistic and creative freedom and reward. So that might be something that I think will translate very well to outside the US, where it's not as commercial of an industry necessarily. Like there's traditionally been more room for films that are smaller in scope and not expected to generate huge profits,
And then when you work with live musicians, then, obviously was a fewer number compared to a full-blown orchestra. Do you at times combine, MIDI generated music with the sound of the live musicians?
I do use MIDI, but I don't ever use it. Like if I want violins, I use violins. If I want piano, I use piano. I would use MIDI for, so I think what you're really asking is, because I work on smaller films, I honestly don't need a full orchestra. In fact, it would be kind of a waste in some ways because it's just too big. It would overpower the film. When I need a bigger sound, I have a lot of techniques I've developed with other people I work with, my orchestrator and my score supervisor. And, over the years, if I need, I oftentimes, I've never worked with more than 8 strings at a time. That said, I've learned techniques for making them sound a lot bigger if I need it. But generally, I haven't really needed it to be huge and orchestral. I use orchestral instruments. I have musicians I work with that overdub beautifully when I need woodwinds or brass or whatever. Do a lot of overdubbing and get the results I want with the live player. So those are the kind of things that, I was going to bring some of my scores, because when you're doing strings, you kind of have to figure out how you're going to approach getting the sound you want with 4 players or with 8 players. And so a lot of that comes in, like orchestrating, which would traditionally be used in a different way. We orchestrate for the purposes of overdubbing to get a result we want. So if we want this particular little section to sound like a chamber group instead of 4 players, we have ways of orchestrating the parts to get that result. And I think, I think of myself as crafty and there are lots of ways to get great results when you have talented people playing your music or helping you orchestrate it, thinking outside the box, thinking of ways to get the sound you want. And it also leads you to more non-traditional sound, in other words, if you studied orchestration and you studied classical composition, there are things about that actually fight. I think that they make it a little harder to work in film, because in film, the film gives you the structure of the music. You don't approach it like, oh, this is a sonata, or this is a song type structure, or whatever your harmonic structure is. What I've discovered is the more open I am to listening to the film and letting it tell me what the structure of the music needs to be, it becomes more integrated into the film and a better storytelling tool. And this is a change in traditional, the way music was traditionally thought of in terms of composition and orchestration. A lot of times I don't even figure out the orchestration of, say, woodwinds until I'm actually recording, and then I hear something that my player plays. I go, oh, let's do that on the flute instead of the clarinet. You know what I mean? So it gives you a lot of room to keep it's a different way of orchestrating. And so I think it's important to, when you first start out, you might be kind of saddled with certain structures you've learned or not learned, then you don't have any tools. But it's important to, this speaks to developing your own sound, your own voice in the music. And so my approach to the way I've dealt with my budgetary limitations has also helped define my sound, because I didn't even start out thinking about using an orchestra. I started out thinking about, how do I make this sound the way I want it to sound? Oh, that's interesting. I'll use all violas today. I mean, I might not have thought of that if I was coming at it from traditional orchestration. So in that sense, I think it's really kind of great this is what I was talking about earlier. You have to be creative in everything. You can't just go, okay, now I'm orchestrating. Let me get my orchestration book out and see what they did. That's not going to help you necessarily when you have two players and you're trying to get a lot of maximum result from that in your score. But on the other hand, it opens you up to new possibilities that you would never have considered had you had a traditional orchestra.
Exactly. One other question. You talked about your, I think, 2 months teaching experience in Chicago. Where did you exactly teach there?
I just came back from Columbia College in Chicago. It's a wonderful arts college, and they have a beautiful, they have a really wonderful master's. They have an undergraduate in music composition, and I think in film media. But then they have this wonderful program. It's a 2-year master's program in composition for media. And so mine was a workshop class where we did basically what we're going to do in Baden, except we had 2 months to do it. And so we really got very in depth with the material. Although I have found, I have some wonderful presentations I do where, like, for instance, I'll show you some footage and I'll just plug in various different musical approaches. And it's kind of like people, it's worth 1,000 words, because people watch it and I go, well, so what did you think of that, for that music, and what did it do? So we have exercises like that can sort of bring the experience into focus very quickly. And then, so we'll collapse it down a little bit.
Well, what it means is basically you bring your experience from teaching at a college, bring that to Baden, which is absolutely awesome.
And the other thing I want people to know is I actually started out teaching filmmakers how to work with composers. That was much more my focus. And I love doing that. Believe me, I love doing that, because I feel like a good director needs to understand that they can direct their composer as well. And there seems to be some fear or anxiety associated because they don't feel as in control of the music process. But I'm there to convince them that they know what they need to know. They just have to look at it and incorporate a few other ideas, and they'll be able to direct their composers as well as they direct their editors. So anyway, so then it started, I've done all kinds of different workshops, and I've also done them in other parts of the world. And it's been very interesting, doing that.
Excellent. And, the relationship thing, especially between the composer and the filmmaker, is so important. And, as we spoke about earlier, that, we all can have our tools these days, and everyone can have his fully loaded laptop. It's those skills which really make the difference.
Oh, yeah. I think, when filmmakers want to work with a composer, and that's because they've had a good experience, and that's how you build your client list. It doesn't serve you at all to work with filmmakers and blame them for any shortcomings in the relationship. I mean, it's kind of like this is our job. I'd say 80% of our job is this relationship, creating a good relationship with our filmmaker. That is what will help you succeed in your career more than anything. Being able to do that, having a good attitude, being able to deal with your frustrations in a positive way that are productive and constructive, and helping your filmmakers be more comfortable to go deeper into the collaboration with you. Those are things that will serve you very, very well. I mean, look at Steven Spielberg and John Williams. You know, why do you think he keeps going back to John Williams? Because he gets what he wants and he enjoys the experience. And those are the two really important aspects.
Yes, and that's also where you will have a lot to share about your class.
Yeah.
Really, really looking forward to that. So the last question I'd like to ask you before we conclude this very interesting discussion. In one of your interviews, you recently said, live is a jam session.
Oh, yeah.
What's behind that?
Well, I keep learning this. You know, you can sit and try to prepare. For me, I can sit and try to prepare. What am I going to say today in the webinar? You know, I can make a list of things and I can think about that. And then I forget when we're talking, you know. So for me, what I've realized is being very present in the moment. And I come from a background playing improvisational music. I was in a swing band for many years, and I've done jazz and all kinds of different things. And that thing that happens when you're playing music, like translating that into the rest of my life, like music has been an incredible teacher for me because I've been so motivated to do it. And I've learned all these things, these skills that actually apply very well to life. And one of them is improvisation, being able to connect in with, feel what's happening, connect into it, grasp it, engage, and respond in the moment to what's happening. And that's what a great jam session is when you're playing music. And everyone feels it when it happens, including the audience. You know, you start playing and you're playing, and then all of a sudden the drummer does something, and then the guitar player does something, and then I do something. And then we all keep pushing each other and engaging each other in this musical interaction. And that's a great jam session. And so there's no way to make that happen except to just be completely open and in the moment. And so I've started approaching my whole life that way. Just be flexible and pay attention and experience what's come into my, wherever I am, whatever I'm doing. Okay, I'm here. Let's see what's happening. You know, what can I, you know, how can I engage with it? And I think if you do that, at least I've found for me, it makes, I'm not scared to be in front of people. I'm not intimidated when I know I have to do an interview or be on TV or whatever. I just try to bring my full attention and self to whatever I'm doing. And if it sounds slightly Zen, I guess it is, because I've never studied that, but I've read a little bit about it, and it seems like, wow, when you're fully engaged in the moment, then you can really respond in a much deeper way, in a much more satisfying way. So that's what I meant about that. And life is just a big jam session, really, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And which brings us back to the beginning of our conversation where we were talking about soul searching and finding your own way, because once you have mastered that, you can be in the moment. Then you get this mental presence to be right there in the jam session life is. And on that note, Miriam, I got a lot of positive comments here. People really enjoy what you have been sharing. So thank you so much for being with us here tonight. And I can't wait to attend your masterclass in Baden. And you know, we're still open for registration. So if anyone who was with us tonight or who watched this later on is interested what Miriam has to share, and as you can tell, she has a lot to share, definitely hop over to her website and sign up. And it will be great to see you all in Baden. And thank you very much for being with us today, and hopefully see you soon in Baden. And I'll definitely see you in Baden, Miriam. Looking forward to that.
And I'm kind of looking at the comments because getting to know who's out there a little bit. It's so amazing. You're from all over the world. I mean, I love this. It's really great. Thank you for coming to the webinar today.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you, Miriam. And we'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good luck, everybody.